Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into something darker than usual, darker than the dungeon cellars, darker than the clouds that hang low over your sodden village. You're standing in a muddy path, just outside a crumbling granary, and every step feels heavier than the last. Why? Because you haven't eaten anything real in days, maybe weeks. The wooden bins that once brimmed with barley and rye are now just echo chambers for the scratching of mice. You already know what's coming, don't you? And no, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through thick puddles that weren't here last year. The path used to be firm, packed hard by years of carts and boots. Now, every cart track is a little canal. The earth's gone soft like the belly of a drowned pig, and the granary, the proud centerpiece of your village, is mostly empty. There's some mouldy oats, a few rat droppings, and a broken rake. You used to hear laughter echoing here during harvest. Now, just the creak of the wind pushing through holes in the timber. It's the spring of 1316, but it doesn't feel like spring, not really. That year marks the beginning of what historians call the Great Famine of 1315-1317, a brutal stretch when Europe's food supply collapsed. Why? The weather. That's always a popular villain. Cold spells, unrelenting rain, and a growing season that never really grew. Some say this was the result of a larger climate pattern we now call the Little Ice Age. Others argue it was just bad luck, paired with poor grain storage and over-farming. Historians still argue whether it was nature's wrath or man's own stubborn greed that tipped the scale first. Whatever the cause, you feel it, every hour. Your stomach churns in strange ways, not sharp or loud, but slow, like a wolf pacing behind your ribs. You're not starving yet, not truly, but you're circling the drain. There's an older woman in the village who swears the grain was cursed. She tells anyone who'll listen, and not many do anymore, that when the granary door was opened last autumn, something flew out, something small and black with eyes like coals. She's always muttering about omens now, but then again, she also thought her goat was the reincarnation of St. Cuthbert, so still, people are listening more than they used to. That's the thing, when the bread goes, so does reason. Neighbors who used to laugh with you at the fire now keep to themselves, hoarding stale crumbs like they're gold. You know Thomas the Miller's got something tucked away. You saw him scurry out of his house late at night, burlap sack over his shoulder, headed for the woods. You considered following him. You didn't. Yet. The village priest tries to lift spirits. He says this is a test that the Lord gives with one hand and takes with the other. That suffering cleanses the soul. But he's got cheese in his cellar, doesn't he? You saw his boy nibbling some just yesterday, wiping the grease off his chin like it was a sin. You're not sure if your faith is strong enough to make you forget the smell of melting butter. And it's not just the people. Even the animals know something's wrong. The dogs have stopped barking. They're quieter now, more watchful. They don't wag their tails as much. They're waiting. One night last week, you saw them circling something in the ditch. It was too dark to tell what it was, but it didn't sound like a deer. You've been stretching your meals, watered broth, beet tops, anything vaguely edible. Someone down the lane boiled linen to get the starch out, said it took the edge off. And honestly, they didn't look that crazy when they said it. Your own food stash is down to a lump of salt and 3 onions the size of your thumb. You're not proud, but you're starting to ration the onions half a slice a day. You lick the knife after cutting, trying to convince yourself it tastes like stew. This isn't a story with a sudden twist. You already know the arc. The food is gone, the land is wet, the sky is grey, the people are restless. And you? You're hungry in ways you didn't know a person could be. Not dramatic hunger, not falling to the floor, clutching your belly, but a kind of humming numbness, like your bones are growing lighter. Maybe you'll find something tomorrow. Maybe the rains will stop. Maybe the Lord will send a cart of grain. But not tonight. Tonight, you lie on your straw mat, the wind moaning through the cracks, and dream of crusts you can no longer remember the taste of. The rain hasn't stopped. Not today, not yesterday, not last week. You've stopped trying to count. The mud clings to everything now. The thatch roofs slump under its weight, and the chickens have abandoned the yard entirely, leaving behind claw marks and a few scattered feathers. You sit by the fire pit, though the fire hasn't truly burned in days. Smoke rises faintly from a handful of damp twigs and dried dung, but it's all show, no warmth. You rub your hands together more out of habit than hope. The air feels like a damp cloth draped over your skin. The cold, relentless wet has done something cruel to the earth. Fields that once glowed green are now a mess of standing water and slick furrows. The barley sprouts early, then withers before it forms heads. The wheat, don't even ask. The thatch-eared elders in your village shake their heads. No one's seen a season like this. Historians, looking back, call it the Great Rains. And they weren't poetic about it. This wasn't just drizzle. This was months of steady downpour across northern Europe, starting in 1315. The kind of rain that doesn't just ruin crops, it ruins plans, ruins hope. Roads vanish, trade halts, and hunger blooms like mold in the dark. You try to help in the field, but every step sinks you deeper. Your boots come off twice in the muck before you decide to walk barefoot. The cold squelch of wet soil between your toes should be unpleasant. Somehow it's just part of your day now. You've grown used to unpleasant things. The manor steward passed by earlier, standing upright on a well-fed horse with clean hooves. He didn't stop to talk. He didn't even look at you. But you saw the sacks tied behind his saddle, probably seed grain heading to the hill fields, the good land, the dry land, land that doesn't belong to you. Not that it matters anymore. You and the rest of the village know the seeds are a gamble. Last season, half rotted before sprouting. You're planting dreams into a soup bowl of mud and praying something green climbs out. Some people still believe it will. Old Wulfric swears by burying a carved piece of soapstone in each furrow, says it pleases the earth's spirits. He's got that distant look in his eyes again, the one he had when his wife died, and he started talking to his chickens. You don't argue with Wulfric anymore. You're too tired. And that's the real danger. Not just the rain, not just the ruined crops. It's the tiredness that sets in, the kind that crawls beneath your skin and makes you sit just a little too long on a wet bench before standing up again. A quiet surrender. That night, a small miracle. A thin patch of stars slips through a tear in the cloud cover. The first you've seen in weeks. You look up, half expecting them to blink out as quickly as they appeared. But for a few moments, you remember what dry nights felt like. What hope used to taste like. Someone across the village starts to sing, softly. An old tune, half lullaby, half prayer. You can't tell if it's a child or a woman, but it pulls at your ribs. For a moment, everything pauses until a distant rumble of thunder pushes the silence back into the mud. There's a fringe belief going around, whispered in darker corners, that the sky is angry. Not God, the sky. That something ancient and forgotten has been disturbed. Some blame a lunar eclipse that happened earlier that year, swearing the moon's face turned a deeper red than it should have. Others blame a wandering monk who passed through 2 seasons ago and cursed the land with foreign prayers. Historians still argue whether this desperation was fueled more by religious fervor or sheer fear. But either way, people are starting to light candles not just for saints, but for stars and stones and anything that might listen. You pull your cloak tighter and head back to your hut. Inside, your family is quiet. Your youngest sister has taken to pressing her ear against the dirt floor. She says she's listening for the earth's heartbeat. You pretend it's a game. She hasn't smiled in days. Your mother's sitting by the window with a cracked bowl of water, rinsing the same cloth over and over. The fabric is threadbare, more whole than weave. But the motion gives her something to do, a rhythm, a reason. The wind picks up again, pushing droplets in through the cracks in the wall. You lie down, curl in on yourself, and try to dream of drier lands, though you've never seen any. You wonder if, somewhere beyond the next ridge, the sun is shining. You wonder if someone there is dreaming of you. By morning, something's changed. It isn't the rain. It's still falling, steady as a drumbeat on your thatched roof. But the forest feels closer. It shouldn't. The trees have always kept their respectful distance from the village, clustered in their tidy borders like obedient sentries. But now it's like the wild is creeping in on padded feet. You notice it first when you see a blackbird pecking at a cabbage stalk beside the well, bold and unbothered. Then the crows, there are more than usual, and they're quiet, watching. It's not that they're hungry, it's that they know you are. Then comes the real sign. Tracks, large ones, deeper than they should be. You spot them near the edge of the barley field, prints pressed into the softened earth like exclamation marks from nature. Too large for a dog, too deliberate for a boar. You follow them just long enough to realize wolves. Not just one either, they're back. And not the shy kind that slink along the tree line. These are bold, grey-muzzled things with lean flanks and cold eyes. You see one, just once, between the trees, its gaze locked on you like it knows something you don't. And maybe it does. See, during famines, wolves become bold. There's historical record from France, 15th century, of entire wolf packs entering villages, even snatching children from doorsteps. Chroniclers called them famished shadows. But you don't need a book to tell you that. You can feel them watching now. Your village has a small wooden palisade, mostly to keep the pigs in and the goats out. Now, folks are patching the gaps with whatever they can: firewood, branches, broken carts. You help, not because you think it'll work, but because it's better than sitting and listening to your own stomach argue with itself. You've started counting ribs, yours, your sister's. Even the oxen, it's like the famine has become an artist, sketching everyone in sharper lines each day. It's no longer just hunger, it's sculpting. One of the village boys swears he saw a wolf chewing on something behind the abandoned mill. When pressed, he says it had fingers. No one laughs. No one says he's lying. The silence that follows is its own kind of confirmation. That night, someone lights torches around the village. They don't help much. The flames sputter in the damp air, casting shadows that leap like dancers. But the light is comforting, sort of. You sit beside one and stare into the flickering orange, imagining it's a hearth fire and there's bread baking inside. Your aunt tries to distract everyone by recounting old forest tales, legends of women who turned into wolves when wronged, of monks who befriended bears, of nights when the trees whispered warnings to those who could hear. You used to roll your eyes. Now you listen. One tale sticks with you. A man who was so hungry he followed a wolf into the forest, hoping to steal its kill. When he caught up, the wolf was gone, but a woman stood in its place, her mouth red and smiling. He never returned. You think of that when you wake up to find claw marks near your door. There's a growing idea, half muttered, half joked, that maybe the wolves aren't the threat. Maybe they're just better suited to this world now. They don't need bread or taxes or saints. They don't need the weather to be kind. They just take what they need and move on. You envy that a little. The village priest holds a gathering to rebuke the beasts in the name of heaven. No one really expects it to work, but it makes people feel better. He throws some incense, quotes scripture, then tells everyone to go home and pray. You stay until the last ember fades, watching the dark edge of the forest like it's breathing. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly feared wolves, or if wolves simply became symbols of nature, of punishment, of what happens when man loses control. But for you, they're not symbols, they're real, and they're hungry. You know because last night, one got the neighbor's dog. You heard it. The yelp. The silence. Then the dragging noise. And no one went outside. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a thin, grey slurry of ground-up beans, rainwater, and regret. You swirl it in the bowl, watching how it sticks to the edges like glue. There's a single carrot stub floating in it, a rare luxury. You draw lots for it with your sister. She wins. You let her have it. You used to eat 3 meals a day, bread, cheese, onions, sometimes even salted fish on feast days. Now it's one bowl, shared, and you pretend you're full by licking the spoon slower. Hunger, it turns out, isn't loud. It's a whisper, persistent, patient, gnawing. And lately, it's getting creative. You catch yourself chewing a piece of bark, not because you think it's food, just to feel something in your mouth. The village's stew pot used to be a bubbling symbol of community. Everyone contributed, leeks, grains, whatever they had. Now it's mostly water and turnip peelings. You've seen people slip in river rocks just to make it look full. One of the older boys claims it adds minerals. He's not wrong. He's also probably broken 3 teeth. And the worst part? You still crave, not just food, flavor. You think about butter like it's an old lover. You miss the peppercorns your uncle brought back once from a far-off market, so spicy they made your nose run. Now the only thing running is your nose from sleeping near the fireless hearth. It's easy to start thinking about what used to be, but harder to ignore what's becoming normal. You watch your neighbor scrape the last film of porridge from the pot with a stick and feed it to her baby. The baby doesn't cry anymore. That's silence. That's the new normal. And you're getting used to it. That's what scares you the most. At the edge of the woods, people are foraging more than ever. Nettles, sorrel, even dandelions. You pretend to be an expert. This one's good boiled. This one will make you sick. You're right half the time. Good enough odds for hunger. There's a moment of accidental comedy when 2 villagers argue over whether a clump of green slime is edible moss or a poisonous fungus. One dares the other to eat it. He does. He survives. Somehow, that becomes dinner for 5. Welcome to the culinary arts of the famine era. Historians confirm that during Europe's famines, people regularly consumed things they'd never touch in normal times: bark, roots, dirt, even animal dung, cooked sometimes. The lines between food and not food blurred fast. The line between person and resource? Well, that comes later. There's an old man named Allard who swears by gruel stones, tiny pebbles boiled with herbs and prayers. He says the flavor's in the spirit. You don't believe him, but you boil a few anyway. One woman starts trading her embroidery for stale biscuits. It works for a while. Then people realize they don't need tablecloths when there's no table. You remember what your father once told you when you were still young enough to believe grown-ups had answers. As long as we have salt and boiling water, we'll be fine. You have neither now, but you do have a plan. You and a few others gather one night and dig up the old communal garden plot. It's barely more than a rectangle of weedy soil, but you work quietly by moonlight like you're doing something holy. A few hours later, the furrows are ready. Someone scatters leftover grain. You pray it takes root. You know it won't. There's another sound in the dark, a low moan from the forest. You freeze. You hear nothing. Then a branch snap, something moving on four legs. The others don't react. They're used to it. You're getting used to it. That's the word again. Used to it. Historians still debate whether acceptance was a coping mechanism or a cultural norm. But to you, it's survival. You don't get used to porridge. That's mostly water and leaf soup that burns your tongue from mystery weeds. You don't make it. You head back to your hut, belly rumbling, head spinning. You crawl into your mat and curl around your hunger like it's a sleeping cat. Won't let you rest, but it will keep you warm, at least for tonight. Your sister doesn't get up this morning. She's still breathing, barely. Her chest rises in slow, shallow waves, and her eyes flutter when you whisper her name. But her cheeks are sunken, her lips cracked, and her skin cool even under the wool scrap blanket you both share. You sit by her, chewing a dry piece of root like it's a biscuit, watching, waiting, hoping. The truth is, the youngest always go first. That's not superstition. It's something you've seen now in every home, every family. The little ones don't have stores to draw from. They're still building, so when food vanishes, so do they. She was just starting to learn her letters. Had a little wooden board she scratched on with a bit of charcoal. She liked drawing trees. Now, she doesn't even have the strength to whisper. Her voice is lost under the weight of nothingness. You carry her outside for air. It's still raining. You hold her close anyway. This is where the real cruel edge of famine shows itself, not in your hunger, but in watching others fade. There's a kind of helplessness to it that eats faster than any lack of bread. You remember last autumn, before it all went bad, children chasing geese in the field, squealing in the wind. Now those same children sit on doorsteps with swollen bellies and glassy eyes. Some no longer respond to their names. There's a grave being dug in the churchyard. You hear the dull thump of a spade all day long. It's always the same man digging, Martin, the cooper. He doesn't even look up anymore. It's as if the ground opens itself now, as if it's hungry too. In some towns there were reports of entire families burying infants in secret, not out of shame, but to avoid public spectacle. Historians note a trend. The youngest were lost first, then the old, then the strong. Starvation is an equalizer, but it follows a slow, deliberate path. The priest has started reciting a new line in his sermons, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away." You don't know if he believes it anymore. His hands tremble more each day. He's been fasting for penance. Or maybe he's just out of food. Your mother starts boiling a broth with crushed eggshells and weeds. It smells like bitterness and wet stone. She coaxes your sister to sip it. She takes a drop. A good sign? Maybe. You lie, you tell her stories about the feast you'll have next week, a roasted goose, a tower of honey cakes, even a new pair of shoes for her. She smiles a little at that, just a flicker before drifting off again. That smile is enough to make your chest ache harder than any empty stomach. Down by the river, someone's built a shrine, a pile of stones wrapped in ribbons, with a bowl of milk in front. You don't know who it's for. Maybe a child, maybe every child. The milk's gone sour, but no one touches it. It's sacred now. Some of the older villagers speak in hushed tones about mercy herbs, the kind you give when there's nothing else to give. You don't ask questions. You don't want to know who's thinking about it. Historians still argue whether tales of infanticide during famines are exaggeration or just bitter truths smoothed out by time. Chroniclers from the Low Countries to Italy recorded these events with eerie similarity. The silence, the guilt, the shrines no one would admit to building. That evening, you carry your sister inside and hold her hand until sleep takes her. She mutters in her dreams. You think you hear her say, warm. You lie beside her, unmoving, listening to the wind outside rattle the door like a beggar. And when you finally drift off, your dream is simple. She's drawing trees again. You wake to the sound of a knock, but it's not at your door. It's the clang of a ladle against a pot somewhere in the village square, rhythmic, sharp, impatient. It means one thing: someone's cooking something, and they want you to know. You rush out barefoot, not even pausing to wrap your cloak. Others are already gathering, eyes sunken, faces taut with disbelief and curiosity. At the center of the square, hunched near a low fire, is Brigid, the village midwife. She's stirring a pot with the solemnity of a priest. You can smell it before you see it. Thick, fatty steam curling up into the drizzle. There's meat in there, or at least something close to it. Brigid sees your expression. Bone broth, she says. Goat mostly, bit of squirrel, found it yesterday. People murmur blessings, one even weeps. Brigid ladles out small cups, bark-thin wooden ones she's carved herself. Just a sip each, she warns. It'll do more good in the air than in the belly. And she's not wrong. You clutch your portion like it's a treasure, breathing in the steam, barely sipping. It's the best thing you've tasted in weeks. Salty, faintly sweet. The warmth spreads through your chest like firelight. There's something holy in that broth. Maybe it's the marrow, or the rosemary she tucked in from her herb pouch. Maybe it's the hope. You feel like crying. You don't. Brigid, they say, used to be a nun, back before her eyes turned cloudy and her knees stopped bending right. Now she tends the sick, births the young, and buries the dead. A one-woman triage for a village slipping into silence. She started making remedies from almost anything. Moss for the gums, crushed snail shells for the belly. She once fed a feverish boy a tea made from boiled owl feathers and honey. He lived. She calls that divine luck. Others say it was the honey. There's a strange comfort in her certainty. She says the rains will break by Candlemas, that the land needs to grieve before it grows again. You want to believe her? You want to believe something. Historians note that village healers in the Middle Ages often walked a blurry line between science and superstition. Some treatments were ahead of their time: garlic poultices, vinegar rinses, willow bark for pain. Others, less so, like bleeding the patient with a rusty fishhook or applying badger fat to treat melancholy. Brigid believes in both. She wraps your sister in a poultice of crushed ivy and something that smells vaguely of licorice. Your mother watches with the expression of someone praying with their eyes. You say nothing. You're afraid your words might break the spell. Brigid hums when she works, low, tuneless, constant, like a wheel turning. Later that day, she teaches you how to make cough syrup from boiled pine sap and mashed apples, if you can find an apple. Steal one, she says with a wink. Tell God I said it's fine. You don't laugh, but your lips twitch. She sends you out with a list. Goosefoot, coltsfoot, a clean cloth. You scavenge what you can. Anything that feels like doing is better than sitting, better than listening to the wind and thinking too much. You come back with a handful of plants and one broken comb you found half buried in the dirt. She takes it, scrubs it, and gives it to a boy who hasn't had a reason to smile in days. That's the thing about Bridget, she doesn't just heal bodies, she knits something invisible back together too. A thread between people. A reason to talk, to gather, to believe that tomorrow still might happen. Historians still argue whether community healers like her truly helped survival rates or simply comforted the dying. But right now, in this cold, wet village, you'd swear she's the only reason the heart of the place still beats. That night, you sleep beside your sister again. Her breathing is stronger, not perfect, but better. You say thank you, not to God, not to the sky, to Bridget. You hear it before you see it. A rumble in the distance, wheels on stone, hooves slapping wet earth. The sound of something coming. You squint into the morning haze, and there it is, a cart. Two of them, actually, lumbering over the hill like slow, creaking miracles. The entire village stirs, heads poke out from doors. A few children run ahead, barefoot and hopeful. You follow, cautious. Nothing good comes for free anymore. At the front of the lead cart rides a man in a fur-lined cloak. He doesn't look hungry. His boots shine, his horse is brushed. His eyes, cold, calculating, scan the crowd like he's counting inventory. He's the Baron's steward. The cart is full of sacks. Not flour, not grain, not dried meat. Books, bolts of cloth, a barrel of wine. And under a leather cover, cheese, fresh cheese, round, plump, fragrant. It smells like wealth. The steward speaks in clipped tones. He is not here to share, he's here to collect. The Baron, it turns out, has heard rumours of the village's disorder. That some peasants refuse their tithe, that others may be hoarding food, that a chicken went missing from the manor's coop. He wants his dues now. Your mother grips your arm hard enough to bruise. A boy behind you starts to cry. Bridget, standing off to the side, mutters something you can't quite hear. One by one, villagers bring forward their offerings, scraps mostly, a cracked comb, a piece of cloth, a wooden spoon. One man offers a small bag of acorns. The steward sneers, then pockets them anyway. When it's your turn, you offer a small bundle of foraged herbs and a cracked pot of boiled bark. He doesn't even look at you, just waves you away, and then you see it. Behind the steward, near the second cart, one of the sacks shifts, just for a moment. But long enough to know what you saw. Bread, real bread, round loaves, scored and golden, not one, dozens, stacked like firewood. You smell them now, faint beneath the stink of wet horse and road dust. Your mouth waters so fast it chokes you. Someone whispers, "Why do they have food when we don't?" No one answers. But the whisper spreads like fire through the crowd. By dusk, the carts are gone. The steward rides off without looking back, trailed by the flickering red of resentment. Behind him, the village is quiet. That night, the bread becomes legend. People talk about it in hushed tones like they would a ghost. Did you see it? Were they real? How warm did it look? It becomes a story you'll tell again and again. Not because you like it, but because it reminds you what's been stolen. Historians agree, during the Great Famine, nobility and church officials often did have reserves. Whole manors survived off hoarded grain while their serfs starved. Some lords even sold food back to their own people at criminal prices. Others simply let them die. Still, some gave. One account tells of a baroness who opened her stores to the village and died penniless. Another describes a bishop who tithed himself into famine. But stories like those are rare. Exception, not rule. And here in your village there is no exception. That night, Bridget organizes a secret meeting. Quiet voices in the back of the chapel. "They eat while we fade," she says, "and we call it order." You don't speak, you just listen. Someone suggests sneaking into the Baron's stores. Someone else mentions stealing from the next caravan. Most just shake their heads. Risk is hard to chew. but the idea has been planted now like a bitter seed. You lie awake later, stomach folding in on itself. The sound of wheels still echoes in your ears. Bread still dances in your nose. You think of biting into it, soft crust, steam curling out, the tang of sourdough, and you wonder, what would you give for just one piece? What would you do? A break in the clouds, a breath of warmth, just for a day. It's the kind of day that tricks you, the kind that whispers promises it can't keep. Birds chirp like they've just remembered how. A dry breeze rustles through the thatch, and for the first time in months, the mud begins to crack. You and half the village take it as a sign. Maybe spring has come early, maybe the earth has grown tired of punishing you. So you do what the desperate always do when hope stirs. You plant. It isn't much. Some peas hoarded from last season. Wheat kernels someone swore were still good. Beans with shriveled skins. You press them into the ground with more prayer than confidence. Someone even breaks into the emergency seed store behind the chapel. The key, conveniently, can't be found. Bridget claims the wind took it. No one argues. You spend all day under the sun, digging, planting, pacing rows like a penitent monk. You sweat for the first time in weeks, and it feels like salvation. By dusk, the fields are dotted with fresh furrows. Someone makes a joke about the harvest feast, and for once, people laugh. You go to sleep that night wrapped in the smell of damp soil and exhausted dreams. You don't even notice your hunger, just the warmth in your limbs and the flicker of something that feels almost like belief. And then the frost comes, hard, sudden, cruel. By morning, everything's stiff, crystalline. You step outside and your breath plumes like smoke. The world sparkles with a lie. The soil crunches underfoot. Shoots have turned black. Leaves have curled like burned paper. Everything you planted is dead. You don't speak. No one does. You just stand there, looking out at the fields, mouths open, eyes dry, like mourners at a funeral where no one brought the body. Historians still argue whether these false springs were part of broader climate shifts or if medieval records exaggerated the sudden swings. But to those who lived it, like you, it's not a theory. It's a death sentence written in ice. Your neighbour, whose name you only recently learned, Agnes, lets out a laugh. Not joyful, not angry, just sharp and empty. She takes off her headscarf, drops it on the ground, and walks away, barefoot. No one follows. Later you walk through the garden you dug behind your hut. The beans you were so proud of lie limp against the ground, frost-bitten and ruined. You touch one. It crumbles. You think about doing nothing, just sitting, letting it all rot. But your sister coughs behind you, a weak sound. Still here? Still depending on you. So you grab the spade again. You dig, not because it will save her, but because doing something feels less like dying than doing nothing. The priest calls for a day of repentance. He says the frost is proof of judgment. He preaches that your hearts must thaw before the land will. You wonder if he's ever had to eat boiled moss. Some of the villagers gather in the churchyard. They kneel on frozen stone, whispering the Lord's Prayer until their lips crack. One boy faints. No one catches him. That night, Bridget comes by with a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, a few bulbs of garlic, one turnip, and a tiny sack of dried nettles. It's not much, she says, but it's something. You want to cry, you don't. You say, thank you. Then you hug her, because what else do you do when a miracle wears boots and smells like nettles? You make soup. Your sister drinks some. She keeps it down. Small victories now feel like feast days. Later, you lie awake and stare at the ceiling. You think about warmth. You think about harvests. You think about next year. If there is a next year, you think about the frost, how quiet it was, how final. The shouting starts before sunrise. At first, it's just a low roar, like the wind has picked up again. But it's not the wind, it's people. Angry, loud, together, which is strange because lately everyone's been so quiet. You run toward the noise, heart racing. Not from fear exactly, from the shock of movement, real, pulsing life. It's coming from the market square, or what's left of it. Carts are empty, the stalls abandoned, the cobbles slick with last night's rain. But today there's fire in the air, figurative for now, but it's early. At the center of the crowd is a merchant, not a local. You've never seen him before. Clean boots, dry cloak, face too round to have missed many meals. He made the mistake of setting up a cart with grain. Not much, maybe a dozen sacks, but enough to start a riot. He's claiming it's for sale. Sale. As if anyone here has silver. As if there's a single coin left that hasn't been traded for onions or gone down a wishing well. Someone throws a turnip. Another grabs the edge of his cart. Then it's chaos. Hands snatch at the sacks. One splits open, and golden grain scatters like treasure. You're not proud of what you do next, but you do it anyway. You dive in, it's all elbows and hunger and frantic fingers. You shove a handful of grain into your cloak, heart pounding like it's trying to escape your chest. Around you, people yell, curse, beg. The merchant screams for the constable. There is no constable. He left 3 weeks ago and hasn't returned. The crowd swells, then breaks. People scatter down alleys, clutching scraps like they've robbed a king. You run too. You don't stop until you're back home, breath ragged, knees shaking. You dump the grain onto the table. It's not much, maybe enough for one loaf, but it's yours. Your mother stares at it in disbelief. Your sister's eyes flicker open and focus on the pile. She smiles, small, tired, real. That smile will feed you longer than the bread. Historians document many such grain riots during the Great Famine. France, England, Flanders. Often sparked not by total absence of food, but by the presence of food sold at impossible prices. When hope becomes visible and remains out of reach, desperation turns to fire. Some called it theft, others called it justice. That night, the village is quiet again, not the hollow quiet of hunger, but the taut silence that follows a storm. The merchant is gone by morning, his cart too, but someone finds one of his boots in the creek. You don't ask questions. Instead, you make bread. A crude, heavy lump of flour and water cooked on a hot stone. It's gritty, it crumbles, it tastes like ash and triumph. You each get one bite. Your sister weeps while chewing hers. You pretend you've just got smoke in your eyes. Later, Bridget stops by. She doesn't ask what happened. She just leaves a pinch of salt and a smile. For a moment, you imagine what the village could be if food weren't a weapon, if people didn't have to steal to survive. But for now, survival is enough. And if someone calls you a thief, well, let them. You've got bread. You knew the rats would come. Not the barn kind, the fat, grain-fed ones you used to chase away with a broom. No, these are survivors. Gaunt, clever, quiet. They move like ghosts and eat like kings. You spot one beneath the hearthstones, its eyes reflecting firelight, unafraid. It holds your gaze for a moment too long, then scampers off with something in its mouth. You think it might have been a button or a toe. Later that night, you hear them beneath the floorboards, scritch, scratch, gnaw. You lie still, eyes wide, listening as they move like water under your feet. Your sister clutches your hand. You squeeze back. There are no dogs left to chase them. One of the village boys sets traps behind the chapel. He claims he caught 2 rats and made stew. No one believes him. Until the next day when you see him smiling, grease on his chin. He offers you a taste. You refuse. You're not sure if it's morality or just the smell. But 2 days later, when your sister coughs up bile and Bridget says she needs protein, You find yourself standing at that same trap. You catch nothing. That night, you boil your boot. It takes hours. You strip the leather, scrub the dirt, cut it into strips, and simmer it with nettles and a pinch of ash. You remember a story Bridget once told. Roman soldiers, she said, used to boil their sandals on long marches. She claimed it gave them strength. You pretend it's doing the same for you. The broth is bitter, oily. You feed your sister 3 spoonfuls and tell her it's a family recipe. She believes you, or wants to. Historians do confirm boiling leather was a common famine tactic, especially during sieges. Paris, 1418, records mention whole neighborhoods cooking belts and saddles. Even parchment books weren't safe. You wonder what knowledge was lost in someone's stew. One man in the village begins trading roasted rats openly. He sets up shop beneath the old bell tower and claims they taste like pigeon. You try not to look at the pile of tails behind him. He calls it his spice rack. You hear rumors of worse: a child gone missing, a pot that never gets washed, a strange smell outside the cooper's house. You tell yourself these are just stories. You need them to be just stories. But deep down, you know better. Hunger changes people, not with a sudden roar, but with a slow creep, like mold in the walls, like rust on iron. You don't even notice it at first. Then one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize your own eyes. Your mother finds an old sack of barley in the loft, forgotten behind a beam, half chewed by mice. You all cheer like it's treasure. And it is. She grinds it with a rock, sifts out the droppings and makes a mash that actually smells like food. You eat too quickly, regret it instantly. Your stomach rebels. You double over, groaning, while your sister strokes your back with thin fingers. You don't care. It was worth it. One boy dies after eating raw mushrooms. His mother buries him behind the stable and says nothing. No one speaks to her for days, not out of blame, but out of fear that the silence might catch. Bridget begins handing out clay charms to the children. Protection, she says, not from hunger, but from despair. You tie one around your wrist. It doesn't help, but it also doesn't hurt. That night, you sit beside your mother, watching the last embers in the hearth. She says nothing. You say nothing. The rats are back, moving in the shadows, bold now. They've learned you're no threat. And you're starting to believe it too. You lie back and close your eyes, picturing bread. Not to eat, but to remember the smell, the warmth. The way it used to make your house feel like a home. Now, your house is just a shelter. And bread is just a ghost. The church bells ring at dawn, not for mass, not for a wedding, not even for the dead. They ring because the priest wants to talk. And when a man of God rings bells in the middle of a famine, people come. You shuffle in with the others, the floor of the chapel echoing with bare feet and slow dragging steps. The walls smell of mildew and candle wax. It used to be comforting. Now it just smells old. The priest stands at the front, pale and thin, his robes hanging loose like they were made for someone stronger. His voice is hoarse, but it carries. He tells you this is a test, that God is watching, that your suffering is a holy fire, purging sin. You glance at the girl next to you, barely 9 years old, with a bandage where her foot used to be. She does not look like a sinner. He talks about Job, about endurance, about manna from heaven. You try to care. You try to listen, but all you hear is the rumbling of your stomach. Afterward, he passes around a dish with crumbs. Actual crumbs. From his own table, he claims. You take one. It's dry, sour, and gone in an instant. Still, people whisper that he's generous. Others say he's guilty. Historians still debate the role of the church during famines. In some areas, the clergy shared from their stores organised almsgiving, even mortgaged church lands to feed the poor. In others, they hoarded food and blamed sin. The truth, as always, lived somewhere in the tension between piety and power. Your priest tries, you think, but he hasn't missed many meals and he still sleeps behind stone walls. A woman asks him what sins the children have committed. He doesn't answer. Someone else mutters something about selling relics for food. That gets a few chuckles, then silence. That night, people begin tying bits of cloth to the trees outside the chapel. Rags, mostly. A strip of apron. A shred of sleeve. It's not a church custom. It's older than that. Bridget says it's for the old spirits, the ones who used to guard the fields before Rome sent its men in robes and Latin. You ask her if she believes in them. She shrugs. I believe in something. You find yourself doing it too. Tearing off a bit of blanket, knotting it to a branch. You don't pray. You don't even know what to ask for anymore. Your sister, ever the quiet one, begins whispering to the cloth each night. Not to God, just to it. The priest disapproves, but he doesn't stop it. Instead, he starts holding extra sermons. He lights more incense. He tells you to give thanks. You stare at the rafters and think about pigeons nesting there. Could you catch one? Could you eat it raw? A boy climbs up one night to try. Falls, breaks his leg. Bridget binds it with willow bark and an old belt. He survives, but only just. You're starting to think that survival is the new miracle. No saints, no angels, just not dying today. You walk past the priest's house that evening and smell stew. Real stew, thick, rich. There's laughter inside. You pause for a moment too long. A shutter slams closed. You walk on. Historians often romanticize the resilience of medieval villagers, how faith carried them through. And sometimes it did, but not always. Sometimes faith frayed. Sometimes it curled up in a corner and starved like everything else. That night, your mother says grace before the meagre meal. A few leaves boiled in brine. Your sister joins in. You don't. You just listen. And when they say amen, you whisper something else, not to heaven, to the cloth on the tree. The road to the manor is steep, slick with last night's rain, and lined with eyes, not literal ones, but you feel watched with every step. A curtain twitches, a chicken squawks and vanishes under a cart. Someone spits when you pass, not out of malice, just fear. No one's quite sure what going to the manor means anymore, but you're out of options. Your sister's fever returned last night. Bridget's herbs are gone. The broth is gone. You boiled the last of your buttons for soup, and it tasted like salt and rust. Your mother said nothing, just looked at the hearth like it might speak up and offer dinner. So now you climb. You have something to trade, a small silver cross, once worn by your grandmother. It's not valuable, not really. But it looks like it might be, and maybe that's enough. The manor looms at the top of the hill like a punishment. Thick walls, sharp towers, windows like watchful eyes. You remember thinking it was beautiful once when you were younger, before you knew what it cost to build something like that. A guard meets you at the gate. His armor isn't polished. That's a lie stories like to tell. It's rusted and smells like sweat and grease. He barely looks at you. What's your business? He grunts. You show the cross. You mention the fever. You don't beg. But your voice shakes. He stares, then disappears inside. You wait a long time. Just when you're about to turn back, the door creaks open again. You're let in. The entry hall is warm. That's the first thing you notice. Not just dry, warm. A fire roars in the hearth, and the stone floor actually feels good beneath your feet. You have to stop yourself from crying. The steward appears. Same man from the grain cart. Still smug, still full. He looks at your offering like it's a dead bird. This, he says, holding up the cross, isn't worth much. You say nothing, just wait. He sighs, clearly annoyed by your existence. Then, surprisingly, he hands you a pouch. Inside, bread, real bread. A heel maybe 2 days old, but soft in the center. And a small jar of something green. You think it might be fat. Don't come back, he says. You nod and leave before he changes his mind. You run back to the village. You don't stop, not once, even when your legs scream. Your sister is still breathing. Bridget helps feed her the bread, bit by bit. You smear the fat on a crust and let her lick it. She closes her eyes and you swear for a moment. She looks full. Your mother kisses your forehead. You don't tell her what you had to do. You don't tell her what you felt when you saw the pantry behind the steward. Shelves stacked with cheese wheels, baskets of onions, herbs hanging from beams, enough to feed your whole street. Historians sometimes describe lords as obligated protectors, guardians of the peasantry in exchange for labor and loyalty. But those books never talk about the gamble you take walking through their gates. Sometimes you get bread, sometimes a rope. The week before, a man from a neighboring village tried the same thing. He got caught sneaking into the manor's orchard. He hangs by the road now, just past the stream. No name, no sign, just a body. Birds have already found him. Your village avoids that path. You don't. You walk past him on purpose every time you fetch water. You look at his face, not out of disrespect, but to remind yourself survival is luck and risk and the smallest scraps of mercy. And this time, you got lucky. You hear the story at the well, not loudly, not directly. It arrives in pieces, whispers, fragments, half glances. It's the kind of tale that no one claims to know, but everyone somehow knows. And like all the worst stories, it begins with someone missing, a woman named Ilsa. She lived on the far edge of the village with her husband and 2 sons. Strong boys, good teeth. She was known for her pickled cabbage, always carried lavender in her apron. No one's seen her in 3 days. Her husband says she went out to find herbs. Bridget frowns at that. No one forages this deep into winter, she mutters. Then someone finds a pot outside her home. It's clean, too clean and heavy. No one says what they think it was used for, but you've read enough between the lines. That night you lie in bed and stare at the rafters. You're not afraid of ghosts. You're afraid of what people become when the bread runs out. Cannibalism during famines is a subject most historians treat with careful gloves. It's whispered through monastic texts found in the margins. Some records from the Great Famine mention meat of a dubious origin. Others are clearer, parents eating children, neighbors vanishing without trace. But always phrased with distance. They did it over there, in that place, not here, not us. Except now, here feels like there. And them feels like you. You're not judging Ilsa, if it was her. You don't know what you'd do if your sister stopped breathing, and the cupboard was empty and there was nothing left but silence. A few days later, a scavenger passes through. He's pale, hollow-eyed, dragging a small cart with rags. He trades bone buttons for mushrooms, tells tales from a village upriver. He says they found a stew pot with a ring still in it. He laughs when he says it. No one else does. The whispers grow louder. People start sleeping with knives under their mats. One man nails a cross to his door, not for God, but to say, "I'm watching." You see a woman stare too long at a sleeping child. She looks away when you catch her. Bridget begins blessing food, not with Latin prayers, but in the old tongue. "So it won't feed shadows," she says. You don't ask what she means. Your mother tells you a story from her mother's time about a winter so harsh the rivers froze solid. People dug up graves, ate wax candles, burned their floorboards to cook shoe leather. "But we never turned on each other," she says, as if by saying it, it becomes true. Your sister coughs in her sleep. You brush her hair back. Her skull feels too sharp beneath the skin. And for a moment, a terrible, fleeting moment, you wonder what she would taste like. You hate yourself for it. You pray it was just a dream. You don't tell anyone. But the thought stays. Historians still argue whether famine cannibalism was widespread or rare, whether it was ever truly real or merely a story the survivors told to push the horror onto others. But survivors never lie for fun. They lie to live, and sometimes to forget. That night, you dig a small hole behind your house. Inside, you bury the silver cross. Not because it's cursed, but because you don't want to ever use it again. Not to trade, not to beg, not to survive. Just to forget the day you almost became the thing you feared most. They say plague doesn't knock. That's not true. You hear it before it enters, soft coughs in the night that don't stop, even when the wind howls. The scrape of footsteps dragging through the mud. Then the smell. Sweet and sour and wrong. It starts with a tanner's wife in the next village over, then her boy, then the man who came to collect her body. By the time the bell rings, it's already here. You wake one morning to a black rag tied on a neighbor's door. You don't need anyone to tell you what it means. You don't go near. No one does. The wind shifts, the sickness drifts. Your village, already bent under the weight of hunger, begins to break. It doesn't look dramatic. No coughing blood or collapsing in the square. It's quieter, slower. People who were already thin just stop moving, stop speaking. They vanish into their homes and don't come out again. At first you think it's just more of the famine, another layer of loss. But Bridget knows better. She's seen it before, back when she lived in the port town. It rides the air, she says, like dust, like a curse. She wraps her mouth with cloth, burns herbs in a cracked bowl, and walks from house to house, muttering prayers old enough to have moss on them. The priest claims it's punishment, again. This time for stealing grain, for faithless hearts, for the tree ribbons, for the whispers. He says those who fall sick should isolate, should pray harder. Then he locks himself inside the chapel and stops answering knocks. One woman dies in the middle of the path. No one moves her for hours. You pass by and cover her face with your sleeve. It's the best you can do. Historians note that during the Great Famine, disease often followed in hunger's footsteps. Malnutrition weakened bodies, and close quarters made easy work for infection, typhoid, dysentery, influenza, and sometimes the plague itself, depending on region. Scholars debate whether the great pestilences of 1348 had earlier whispers in places like yours. Some say yes, you say nothing, you stop drinking from the stream, you boil water when you can, you burn the rags used on your sister, and yet you know it's only a matter of time. You start to notice the signs, lips too pale, fingers tinged blue, that thin sheen of sweat that never quite cools. Your sister still smiles, but she sleeps more, eats less. You don't tell your mother. Instead, you sit beside her and pretend everything is the same. You tell stories, old fairy tales, ones where the hero always finds a magic root or a river of honey. You leave out the endings. They never feel right anymore. Bridget begins making black salves from ash and beeswax. She applies them to the sick with shaking hands. For comfort, she says, not a cure. She teaches you how to do it. You want to ask her why she's crying, but you already know the village takes on a new silence. Not the silence of hunger. This is worse. It's the silence of people waiting to die. You wonder if the wolves know. You think about the stories of cities where carts rolled through the streets calling, "Bring out your dead." You think about towns where they burned the bodies, where they painted crosses on doors. Your village has no carts, just shallow graves and deeper fears.
Still you rise each day. You feed your sister sips of broth. You wash her hands. You sit beside the fireless hearth and try to remember what warmth felt like. And when you lie down at night, you don't dream of food anymore. You dream of air, clean air, wind in open fields, the smell of dry grass. You pray, not for salvation, just for one more morning without a knock.
You've never seen the road so empty. It winds out of the village like a grey ribbon, climbing through fields that used to sway with barley and now lie bare, a patchwork of rotting stubble and standing water. You've walked this road before, to market, to festivals, to chase geese, but never like this. This time you're leaving. Not fleeing exactly, just going somewhere else, anywhere else. Your sister's fever has calmed, her breath stronger, her eyes open, more than closed. She's light enough to carry. Too light. Your mother can't come, her legs are too swollen, and she won't leave the house. Someone has to wait here, she says, though for what, she doesn't explain. Bridget gives you a cloth bundle before you go. Inside, dried herbs, 3 bits of smoked root, and a strip of linen soaked in rosemary oil. For the journey, she says, pressing it into your palm. Her hands linger a moment too long. You think she doesn't expect to see you again? You take the narrow cart path east. Toward the next village, maybe they're faring better, maybe they've had more luck with planting, maybe they'll trade for help. You tell yourself this again and again, like a charm against hopelessness. The first mile is quiet, then the trees grow thick, then the fog settles in. You carry your sister in a sling made from a grain sack. She sleeps mostly, her head against your chest. You sing to keep yourself moving, songs your father used to sing when you had a father. You pass a burned-out farmhouse, no smoke, no signs, just ruin, a broken wheel in the grass, a spoon on the windowsill rusted through. Further on you see a figure in the distance, walking with a limp. You duck behind a tree, hold your breath, wait. They pass without seeing you. You never learn who they are. By the second day, the food is gone. Your sister asks for an apple. You say, "Tomorrow?" She believes you. That hurts worse than lying. That night, you sleep beneath an overturned cart. Rain drips from the axle in a slow rhythm like a ticking clock. You hold your sister close and listen for wolves. There are none. But something howls anyway. Historians often talk about the wandering poor during the famine, those who left their homes in search of food, shelter, survival. Records say that entire villages emptied. Some walked hundreds of miles, most died along the way, others became thieves, some found new places to settle, bringing disease and desperation with them. You don't feel like a threat. You feel like wind, thin, aimless, moving just to keep moving. On the third day, you reach another village. At first glance, it looks promising, roofs intact, a goat tied to a post, a well in the centre. But then you see the windows boarded up, and the doors marked with ash. Someone yells before you can step closer. "Keep walking!" You raise your hands. You explain, "Sick sister. Herbs, nothing to give, just looking for help." They don't come closer. One throws a heel of bread your way. It lands in the mud. You thank them anyway. You walk on. Later, you clean the bread with your sleeve and split it in half. Your sister eats hers slowly. She says it tastes like wood and heaven. You smile. You don't eat yours. By the 5th day, your boots begin to split. You walk barefoot. Your sister hums as you go, her voice barely above the breeze. You hum back. You don't know where the road ends. You just know it has to end somewhere, because staying behind wasn't an option, and going forward is the only thing that still feels like hope. The shrines come first. Just beyond the bend in the road, where the trees thin and the path levels, you begin to see them, Little stacks of stones, bundles of dried flowers, ribbons tied to fence posts, tiny wooden crosses lashed with twine, a child's boot placed carefully beneath a tree. You pass a skeleton, not human, a goat maybe. Its ribs are arched like a broken harp, skull half sunk in moss. You step around it, careful not to disturb the scene. It feels sacred, or at least still. You start counting the shrines. 5, 8, 11, then you lose track. Your sister whispers something, you lean closer. "Are they watching?" she asks. You say no, but you're not sure. Eventually you find a bench. Just an old plank set between two rocks, lichen-covered and crooked. You sit. Let your sister stretch her legs. She's too light. Her ankles look like sticks wrapped in skin. She hums a tune. Something about birds and rain. You try not to cry. One of the shrines has a name carved in it. Anselm. 8 years. Good boy. You don't touch it. You just sit beside it, offering silence like a gift. These roadside memorials are everywhere now. Bridget once said that when death comes too fast for proper burials, the living leave tokens behind, to mark, to remember, to ask whatever gods are still listening to take note. Not the big gods, the small ones, the ones who live in trees and stones and shadows. Historians call these unofficial burial sites. Some treat them as cultural artifacts, others as superstition. Some even argue they weren't burial markers at all, but places where people simply gave up. You believe all of it. You walk past a cairn of carefully stacked bones, small ones. A doll's head rests at the top. Someone placed a daisy behind one glassy eye. You pass a tree where someone has nailed a shoe upside down. You don't ask why. The road continues. Your feet blister. The horizon wavers, but you keep moving. At one point you see something glinting in the grass. A spoon, maybe. You pick it up. Not for value, not for trade, just to hold something that isn't sorrow. Further on, you find a stone wall half collapsed surrounding a field gone wild with thistle and bramble. You climb it and rest. Your sister points to the sky. "That cloud looks like bread," she says. It doesn't. But you nod anyway. You both sit quietly. Watch the clouds pass. It's the closest thing you've had to peace in days. Then a sound. Hooves. You duck low, heart hammering. A rider passes on the road. Alone, cloaked, fast. They don't see you, or maybe they do and don't care. You wait until the dust settles before moving again. By dusk, your sister is too weak to walk. You carry her. Her breath is light. Her words are softer. She murmurs names, people who aren't with you, people who didn't make it. You pass one last shrine before nightfall. This one has a candle, still burning. You don't know who lit it. But for a moment, the world feels warm again. Just for a breath, you camp beneath a leaning birch tree, no fire, just the sound of crickets, startling almost after so much silence. You hold your sister close, her fingers are cold, you hum to her until she sleeps. Then you look up at the stars, you try to remember the names of the constellations, but all you can think of is Anselm. 8 years. Good boy. You trade the spoon for flour. It's not a fair trade, not really. The spoon is bent, tarnished, probably iron. The flour is coarse, mostly chaff, and stored in a pouch that smells faintly of mouse. But the man with the cart takes it anyway. Maybe he sees your sister, maybe he sees your eyes, maybe he just wants the weight of decision to leave his shoulders. Either way, you walk away with a handful of something that might be bread someday. The village you've reached is no better than the one you left. But it's different. That counts for something. People here walk slower. They glance over their shoulders more. Some smile, but the kind of smile you give when you're not sure if you're allowed to feel anything. You sleep in a barn that first night. The hay is mouldy, but it's dry. Your sister sleeps without coughing. In the morning, you do something you haven't done in weeks. You offer work. You patch a fence. You carry buckets. You sweep out a chicken coop that hasn't housed chickens in months. And in return, you get 3 things: a crust of bread, a wool scrap for your sister, and a name. The man with the cart is called Lou. He's not kind, but he's not cruel either. He deals in scraps, buttons, flour, old tools, things that once had purpose. You ask where he gets them. Places where people don't need things anymore, he says. You try not to think too hard about that. Lou teaches you to trade, not in coin, but in weight. What something feels like in the hand, what it meant to someone, what it might mean to someone else. He shows you how to weigh a candle stub against a fish hook, a sewing needle against a sliver of soap. A story, even, in the right company, can be traded for a bite of cheese. People need more than food, he says. They need to remember food. Historians write about this kind of barter economy during famine times. When currency collapsed, people used value proxies. A measure of wax for a measure of barley, a wool cloak for a stone of grain. Even teeth, and yes, teeth, were recorded in some accounts as trade items, especially ivory ones, pulled from the mouths of the dead. You see a woman trade a necklace of baby teeth for a pair of boots. No one flinches. Your sister perks up on the 3rd day. She smiles at you properly this time and eats a whole slice of rye without help. Her fingers are still thin, her hair brittle, but her eyes are clearer. You tell her she's going to be fine. She says, "I know." You start collecting things, little things, a cork, a feather, a ribbon that smells faintly of rosewater. You don't plan to trade them, you just like having them. Proof that beauty still exists. Lou offers you a job, not steady but regular. Carry this, watch that. Tell him who's buying, who's selling, who looks like they might have something hidden under the floorboards. You hesitate, then you agree. It's not betrayal, it's bread. You tell yourself that until it stops sounding like a lie. One day, you walk past a stall and see something glinting on the table. Your silver cross, the one you traded at the manor. You don't touch it. You just look. Then you walk on. Later, your sister asks if you'll ever go home. You want to say yes. Instead, you say, "We'll go somewhere new." She nods. And for the first time, you almost believe it yourself. Spring arrives with no announcement. No trumpets of sunlight, no festival dances, no sudden explosion of green. It just is. One day the mud no longer swallows your feet. The breeze doesn't bite. You see a single bud on a branch and realize the trees have survived, and so have you. The village begins to move again, not in celebration, but in slow, unsure rhythms. Men drag broken ploughs from barns. Women unearth seed bundles hidden behind hearthstones. Children chase shadows again, not for fun, but to feel fast. You join them, not the children, but the rhythm. Lou sends you to the river to meet a barge. They're bringing salt. Salt! You haven't tasted it in months. You're not sure what's more exciting, the cargo or the fact that people are moving things again. The barge arrives. It's half empty, but it exists. That's enough. You help unload sacks with men from another village. They speak a dialect you barely understand, but you laugh together anyway. Someone tells a joke about a pig and a nun and a missing cartwheel. You don't get it. You laugh anyway, because spring is here, sort of. Planting begins, late, hurried, disorganized. People toss seed like prayers. The ground is uneven, the tools are rusted, but they dig anyway. One man breaks a tooth trying to chew last year's barley. He keeps chewing. You watch your sister kneel beside the plot you've claimed, a patch of earth, barely the size of a blanket. She presses peas into the soil with her fingers, lips moving in silent hope. You plant turnips, not because you like them, but because they grow even when the earth doesn't want to cooperate. Brigid, who has somehow appeared here, in this village now, like she was summoned by need, teaches people how to make nettle tea. She shows them how to compost with ash, how to twist damp grass into twine. She says it's not magic. You think she's wrong. Your sister laughs at a bird. You haven't heard her laugh in weeks. She starts asking questions again, about stars, about animals, about the names of plants. You teach her everything you remember. Some of it is true, some of it feels true, that's enough. You go to the chapel one day, not to pray, just to sit. You find a note tucked into a crack in the wall. It says, "You made it." You don't know who wrote it, you keep it anyway. Historians note that the end of famine is rarely clear. There's no ribbon to cut, no feast to declare it finished. Just fewer deaths, fewer empty homes, and eventually, bread. One morning you wake to a smell you almost forgot. Baking. Someone, somewhere is baking. The scent moves like incense through the street. People stand in doorways and breathe. No one says a word. You all remember. The baker's son sells loaves for half a pint. You don't have one. He gives you one anyway. You helped unload salt, he says. You tear it in half and give the bigger piece to your sister. She cries while eating it. You look away. That night, you sleep without hunger. Not full, but not empty. And you realize that's the new miracle. Not joy, not health, but enough. Feast day comes as it always does, not because the hunger has ended, not truly, but because time insists on marching forward, even when your ribs still show and the bread is mostly husk. Tradition is a stubborn thing. It clings like ivy on old stone. The village tries its best. A garland of dried grass is hung over the well. Someone paints a sun on a wooden board and nails it to the chapel door. Children gather bits of broken ribbon from last year's festival and weave them through their hair. A fiddler plays, though the strings are worn, and the tune warbles. You watch it all from the edge of the square. Your sister claps along, face thinner, but eyes bright. She wears a tunic patched with 5 different colors, stitched by a woman who once sewed for nobility and now trades hem jobs for carrots. The tunic flaps like a flag in the breeze. She doesn't mind. The feast, when it comes, is a mockery of the word. A pot of weak turnip broth, 2 loaves of barley bread stretched into 8 slices, a pear, bruised but whole, cut into slivers so small they stick to the knife. Still, people cheer, they sing, they dance, because not celebrating feels like surrender. You take a bite of bread and try not to remember the hollow days. But they echo, don't they? Every bite is shadowed by all the ones you didn't have. Every laugh is underscored by a memory of silence. The priest gives a sermon. He says the worst is over, that God has tested your endurance and found you faithful, that the land has turned her face back to her children. You think of the boy who died eating bark, of Ilse and her pot, of the man hanging by the road. You don't call it faith, you call it endurance. Bridget doesn't attend the sermon. She's by the tree line, showing a few women how to identify new herbs. Coltsfoot, yarrow, mugwort, plants with names older than the chapel. You join her. She hands you a root. Bitter, she warns, but strong. Just like us. You laugh. Later, you sit with your sister beside the fire pit. Someone brings a tin flute. Children chase each other. A dog, an actual dog, wanders into the square and is immediately fed, scraps and prays like a returning hero. A boy tells a story about a man who slept for 100 years and woke to a world with trees made of sugar. Another says he heard there's a city far away where no one went hungry at all. You want to believe both. Historians sometimes treat post-famine celebrations as signs of resilience. Communities that danced even when the music was thin, but they rarely note the hollow eyes behind the smiles, the grief folded beneath the tablecloths. You do, because you were there, because you are there. You get up and walk past the bread table. There's one piece left. You don't take it. You let someone else feel full for once. Your sister falls asleep on your shoulder, warm and soft and real. You look up at the stars and count them just to prove they're still there. And they are. You're not whole. You're not healed. But tonight, you're here. And that's worth dancing for. You don't notice when hunger leaves, not all at once, not in some grand, trumpet-blaring moment where someone lifts the last crust of bread and declares the famine ended. No, it slips away quietly, like a guest who overstayed their welcome and finally saw themselves to the door. You wake up and realize your sister isn't coughing anymore, that her cheeks, though still narrow, have regained their color, that she's out of bed before you are, brushing her tangled hair and complaining that her tunic doesn't fit right. You smile, and it feels strange. You go to the field and see shoots poking up, green and stubborn, turnips, barley, peas. The earth has forgiven you, or at least forgotten. You run your fingers through the soil and it doesn't recoil. You go a whole day without thinking about food. And that's when you know something has shifted. The village is still quiet, but it's no longer hushed in fear. It's a quieter kind of quiet, like the world exhaling after holding its breath too long. People speak in full sentences again. They laugh. They even argue about things that aren't life or death. Lou comes through with a new cart. It's fuller now. He trades cloth, salt, cured fish. You give him an old comb and he gives you dried apples. You both smile, not with pity, with respect. The chapel hosts a song night, not a sermon, just songs, old ones, new ones. One girl sings about a crow who steals a pie. People laugh, not because it's funny, but because they can. You walk with your sister through the square. She skips a little. You pretend not to notice. You pass Bridget, who's teaching 2 children how to wrap herbs into a salve. She winks at you. The hanging man by the stream is gone now. Someone cut him down. No one knows who. A pile of stones marks the spot. Someone planted violets nearby. You stop and look. You say nothing. You remember him. You remember all of them. Because famine leaves ghosts. Not the kind that rattle chains, but the kind that sit beside you when no one else can see. Ghosts that whisper, "Don't forget what you lost." You carry them. You always will. Historians often conclude these chapters with numbers, population loss, crop yield, recovery years. But none of that tells you what it feels like to survive, to walk through a village that almost disappeared and feel the pulse return beneath your feet. You survive. That's the story. Not because you were the strongest, not because you were lucky, but because you kept waking up. Because you kept moving forward even when the road was full of bones. You pass the well where someone has hung a new rope bucket. It creaks a little when you draw water, but it works. Your sister drinks first, then you. You catch your reflection in the surface, and for the first time in a long time, you recognize yourself. The stars are out tonight, not all of them. Some are hidden behind clouds or faint with distance, but they're there, steady and cold, blinking their slow language across the sky. You lie on your back, in the field that nearly swallowed you, listening to the grass sway like waves on some distant sea. Your sister sleeps beside you, curled in a wool blanket. Her breath is even now, no rattle in her chest, no fever in her cheeks. You place a hand gently over hers and she stirs, then settles. You close your eyes and you remember the sound of bread crackling as it cools, the first bite, the softness in the middle. You remember laughter from an open window, the smell of onions on your fingers, the way the sun felt when it meant something. You remember the shrines and the silence and the spoon. But more than that, you remember surviving, not as a story to tell, but as a truth that lives deep inside your ribs, where the hunger once sat. A quiet strength, a whisper that says, you made it, even through that. You roll onto your side and pull the blanket tighter. The earth beneath you is cool and damp, but no longer cruel. The wind hums a lullaby in the hedges, and for the first time in a long time, you're not afraid of tomorrow. Not because you know it will be good, but because you know you'll be there. Sleep well, traveller. You've walked far enough for one night. End of script. Sweet dreams.